Choicach, 5 fields. From W.J. Watson's Place Names of Ross and Cromarty, Place of Fifths, for which use of coic see the 5 coics in Strathdern, Coic na Ferna and so on. Division of land into fifths is a common and ancient Gaelic practice. Tradition makes the 5 coics of Coicach to have been Ach na Harsht, Ach Lochan, Ach Ninver, Ach Vrai and Ach Duarst. The 5 Achs, no Coic Achian, and this is the local derivation of the name.
A big change is that there's far less grazing and a lot more deer. There used to be far more cattle and sheep on the common grazings. On hillsides where there used to be cattle and sheep, they're now just covered in bracken. I wouldn't mind seeing more cattle around, and I would like to see the crofts better utilised, as the grazing levels are now quite low. There's demand for people to have crofts and demand for housing. There is a huge problem where people can't access land or housing, and it's really difficult as the crofts here are absolutely tiny compared to places like the Uists or Lochaber. People hang on to them.
Ilan Barstein, St. Martin's Isle.
Heritage is a dynamic thing. We've tried to bring some of this to life, like with the Seaweed Festival, where we recreated kelp burning that happened not only here, but all up and down the Western Ross coast as an industry. We've made a kelp burning kiln where people could try it out. Kelp was used for fertiliser and glass making. It used to bring in a lot of money and employed a lot of people. We were keen to have a shot and see how easy it is to burn kelp in a kiln. I thought that was great because while it was looking back, it was also looking forward. Because one of the things that we're thinking about doing on Isle Martin is growing seaweed here and looking at it as a bit of a new industry.
Loch Vroin, Loch of Rain Showers.
I think we need to look at different kinds of land use and people's relationship with them. So in terms of land, controversial point, I'm not very pro-crofting. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's natural. I respect it's how things are. I appreciate it's a way of life. I get the culture and the heritage. But you know, beheading people used to be cool. I don't think it's the way the land needs to be, wants to be, or naturally is. So I think that the landscape will change, and we need to think about what do we have, what do we need, what do we actually rely on, and what can we do without.
Alt Bea, Burn of the Birch.
I think if we could see underwater and everyone could see what's there, there'd be no danger of overlooking it. It's just so amazing here what we have. And yeah, I think if folk could see it, I think it is taken for granted. The seabed habitats and the Merle especially, it's just incredible and beautiful.
I think historically it would have been, I don't know if it's just an idyllic view, that it was much more sustainable fishing in the old days. Giarloch, Short Loch.
I'd like to think that people in communities across Westeros want to think about the sustainability of whatever happens in the landscape, whether that be ongoing crofting or ongoing deer management or ongoing rewilding. I would really like to see that that's done with the minds of making sure it's sustainable for people and for wildlife, and not one at the expense of the other, which I think it has been, and now is in danger of flipping to be the other way.
People were fascinated to find out the nature connections that are in the Gaelic language. But then there's also a conversation to be had about how the landscape around us is one that's been created through a kind of cultural genocide.
traces of man in the landscape are much more subtle, I would say. Sometimes they are hidden in things like place names and stories, just local knowledge that isn't necessarily immediately available to the visitor, to dig a bit deeper to get to them. But if you do, it brings the landscape to life, and it brings the area to life, and you go away with a much better understanding of this area, and its people, and its culture. Like Clach na Broch, up near Achtercairn Bray, where people used to put their shoes on their way to church, and Achach Jaistel, which is this area. So Achach being a field and Jaistel we think is a Norse name. So it's telling us that the field of somebody with that name used to live and farm here. And there's another one actually just on the other side of that hill. Towards Pullew, you see a little patch of green to the left of the wee Lochan, and it's called Charlie's Field. I don't know who Charlie was, but his name is still there. And so those are the kinds of places that they make me wonder, they get me thinking about the landscape. Who was this person? Or why? Why is it that it got that name? But then again, you need an understanding of Gaelic to know that it actually means something and it isn't just a word. Ceann Loch Ewe, the head of Loch Ewe.
The landscape is what drew me to the area in the 90s especially. But yeah, like seeing where we're walking now, seeing how rich it is in biodiversity and thinking, this is how a lot of Westeros could have been. It's pretty amazing to think that that's possible. And just how much it's changed. And I think it's easy, just like the landscape even without trees is beautiful. And it's easy just to think of that as natural. But when you see other bits like this, you realise that in fact not everything's right. And probably there is more we could be doing to bring back native woodland.
Kinloch Ewe Primary School has just closed. There's not enough young folk to keep it open. So I think that's very sad and potentially a problem for the area, the depletion of young people living and working here. So it's not positive. I think that's happening, and it'd be great if it wasn't the case and you could change that. I think a lot of the people think that the Highlands of Scotland is completely wild and untouched, pristine, but it's not.
Torvjarston, place of transference.
Every landscape to me in Scotland has cultural heritage value. They're shaped by man and they've been used by humans, so I always think they all do. There's no landscape that doesn't have a human imprint on it, and therefore have cultural value. And they have people living, working, being born there, dying there. So they absolutely do have that cultural value as part of them. It's just layers, isn't it, on top of layers that make them what they are today. And they continue to change because of that. That's quite exciting, but that's also quite difficult because they're continually changing.
A Chumrich, the sanctuary.
I think one of the most important things for communities is the lack of ownership and access to land. It's very difficult to have sustainable development of communities if there's no access to land, or, if it's largely privately owned, especially if the landowner isn't willing to work with the communities. It just restricts so many things. I think it's really positive that there's more and more of these organisations that are advocating for the Highlands. I feel like some of these people think that the Highlands is just like a barren wilderness, There's nothing there, but there's actually so much going on. There's so much enterprising things going on, and loads of things behind the scenes.
Ploch, the lump.
I like the music school. I like the coral beach. I like the wildlife. I like clean air. I like how safe it is. We would like a more open-minded culture with less emphasis on tourism. We would like to see more trees, with a variety of species preferably, with more native animals around the area.
And Dorney, pebbly place.
If you're out every day, regardless of the weather, working with animals, working with the land, it builds a bond and a sort of respect for it. And I think also crofting is an opportunity for people to re-engage with the land, and in different ways, because not everybody who's crofting is going to have livestock anymore. That's changed. But it is a really important part of the environment, and the cultural environment, not just the land environment.
Why are you always ruining my shot?